arranging. Initially, it started centuries ago in Zen Buddhist monasteries. So knowing that, one can see how it has a little bit different development than Western. Western flower arranging tends to be the type that you want to bring your flowers into your home, like from your garden. Clip them and put them in a vase and put them in a place where you can enjoy them inside. Ikebana started by the Zen Buddhist monks with a different kind of frame of mind. They weren't primarily interested in making something beautiful, though something beautiful was made. It was more a part of their spiritual practice, whether they were raking the garden or whether they were sweeping or whether they were sitting in the meditation hall. It was all supposed to be about the same thing, which was expressing your true nature, which is complete and perfect. One Ikebana teacher in our school, I'm a member of the Ikebana International out of Rochester, and she said it very well when she said that what we're trying to do is reveal the true nature of the plants. And like we saw with the bonsai tree, you take something out of nature like that, you may not really pay much attention to it, but when they work with it, they bring out its natural beauty. You can be amazed at how wonderful it is. And the same sort of thing with Ikebana. If you take the materials and you arrange them in such a way that expresses their true nature, you can look at them and just be taken out of yourself just by the beauty of the materials. So over the years, Ikebana developed. It went beyond the Buddhist monasteries. People saw the beauty and they wanted to take it in other places, and many schools followed. The schools that the school that is the oldest is Ikenobo. That's the one that has a lineage all the way back to the Buddhist monasteries. But our school, the school I'm getting training in, the Ichio school, started in about the 1950s. And the whole goal of a lot of these modern schools is to bring the beauty of Ikebana out, not only from the Buddhist monasteries, which had started, but also to put it in places like the modern home, foyers, or in a buffet table, or in a mantle. They even have arrangements like in department stores. And in Japan, they have thousands of schools that are registered. Like in winter arrangements, we'll maybe have just branching material with a few other assistant type of material, and then flowers. Now this one's going to be about the 4 or 5 o'clock. Still a little bit too similar to the other one, in length anyways. The nice thing about this too is after, depending on the arrangement you're doing, after a little while, you're completed. Unfortunately, with bonsai, it may take a long time. The other advantage is that last, this does not. So there's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So the best of both worlds is do both of them. Do bonsai and Ikebana. These are just a little bit shorter.
You said this is myrtle?
Yeah.
Once it's cut and you finish, how long does it maintain its green before it dries out?
You know, myrtle is really amazing. I've had myrtle last for weeks. I've also had it, you get to know what material. Mums are wonderful. I mean, if I had to pick one flower, mums would be it. They last forever. You can buy them, I buy them, my material from a wholesaler. They come dehydrated. Don't put them in water. Most of the times these are shipped to them, they're just cold, and they took out, the leaves are limp, the flowers are limp. I put them in water, within a day they're like they were never dehydrated at all. So mums are perfect. Some others, material that I'll show here, they can look wonderful, then all of a sudden, boom, like the next day they're limping and, you know, they just don't look good. But myrtle, I've had the last couple of weeks. Now this, some of the myrtle that I bought here, I put it in water and then the tip started to wilt. So even myrtle, on average, myrtle lasts a long time. So this isn't like about the 5 o'clock position. A lot of times we will put it in and bend it down. So I think you can begin to see the scalene triangle. I'm just going to turn this around real quick. Now to me that's looking a little bushy, so I'm going to take it out and then clean the top up a little bit more. And some will bend. The nice thing about myrtle, it'll bend a little bit, so even though they tend to be straight material, you can bend them quite a bit and they're forgiving that way. So even if the tip doesn't, if you like, well gee, this side looks better than this one, but the tip is going that way, you can usually bend it pretty nice and change it. Now, usually on this, we like to, this tip is going forward, this tip kind of goes this way, and this one comes up a little bit, but it's still directed toward the viewer. Again, it's about engaging the viewer. The nice thing about these bungs also is that they, at least the Fuji bungs, if they're too big for your arrangement, you just remove the petals on the outside. And then they look like the way they should.
Do they have a name, those bungs?
These are just called Fuji or spider bungs. And what will happen is, the nice thing about these, the ones that turn bad first are the lower ones, so you can just pluck them out. I've had some arrangement, I said, gee, that's a little bit too big for the arrangement. So what I do is I just pluck them around until they get to the right size. You look at it and it still looks, even from the bottom, good. So the nice thing about these too, some of the material you use has a very thin stem, like a fern. And if the stem is thin, it won't sit well in the needle holder because the needle holders aren't so close together that they will fall out. So you clip this here, you stick the stem through that one, and you use that as a little booty to keep the stem in place.
You always want to go with number.
Usually, that was, I mean, traditionally, that's what you do. The thing about that is we're kind of, there's a Ikebana nowadays is getting away from the hard and fast rules. There used to be a rule that the stems never cross. But now every school has a crossing form where the stems cross in an aesthetic way. And then there's, if the flower arrangement has 4 flowers, if 3 tend to be grouped together, and then you have 1. So it's the same an odd number, but when you count them all together, it's an even number. So we're kind of getting away from that, or not limiting ourselves to that anymore. So when we do these flowers, there's the tall one, which tends to be what we call the bee flower, bud flower. It's the one that has yet to come into blossom. It's not the full adult flower. The main flower, the A flower, is not as tall, but it's the one leaning forward the most toward the viewer. And the C flower is the one that's like the day-old one. You kind of put it in the back. I think this one is about the smallest. And that's not going to be more than, it's always going to be shorter than the main stem. I mean the third main stem. So again, we follow that 3/4 rule. And we like these within the triangle, scaling triangle that we formed. We like to give them some space. In this form, we typically will have space, if you can imagine, like a butterfly going through them.
What is that form called?
This is the Morabana upright. Morabana being, using this type of container. If we have a vase, you can follow the same sort of pattern with 3 stems, 3 flowers. That would be called Erie. Those are more difficult to do because you don't have a pin holder. You just have to place in the vase in such a way that they take this position. Now these two, I'm going to say this is the, this again being the bee flower. I mean, all these mums look the same, but ideally this would be more of a bud. So if it's enough of an issue, I'll pull more of the petals out so it looks smaller. But a lot of times we don't make that big a deal about it if the flowers are just beautiful. Shorter. This one usually is put about the 6 o'clock. And the flowers typically will be within this triangle. They're the kind of the focal point. And let me just double check here. Just shorten this a little bit more.
Do you have special scissors like the Bonsai guys?
We do, but the problem is these typically are the ones we get from Japan. They're good, average. You can't really get into some of the small places with this because it's too wide. So we do use this one, particularly if you don't want to take the stem down, you want to trim some things. And then there's some that are just the branches are really big and you have to use more like pruners.
Are you dipping them just in water there, or is there something in there that makes a solution?
This is just plain water.
Just plain water.
But a lot of times when I get a material from the wholesaler, I have to prep them because they're dehydrated. So I'll take them home as soon as I'll take them out of the, when I buy them, I put them in water, bring them home in water. When I get them home, I clip the ends, put it in a solution called Dip It for about a second, and then put it in fresh water, and that helps restore. And there you go. Just 3 stems, 3 flowers. So I'm going to put this over there and I'll show you another one that we call the flowing form. If I don't spill it. way or this way. Not so much from this angle. And I didn't show you, but if you look at it from this side, it's not as pretty because everything's kind of leaning forward. It looks kind of odd. So a lot of these are front view type of arrangements. Let me just clean this up a little bit. Now, if you have, a space that's small at home that you'd really like to have a flower, I don't know, you have a little shelf somewhere, we would basically follow the same type of arrangement. Except maybe you would have remove one of the elements, like the second stem or or just have those two and not that one, or remove one of the flowers. You just reduce the number of elements and shorten it down. You can't, in a small space, you can't have all three elements. And then sometimes what we'll do, variations of that will include changing the materials up. The first and the second main stem may be the same thing, but the third main stem may be something else. It may be a hosta leaf. Or the first main stem, the tallest one may be myrtle, but the second one would be something different, and then the third main stem may be even something different. You have to kind of switch things up. The flowers tend to remain the same though. Now, I don't have my pin holder here, but it's behind there, so let me go get that. This is also a suiban. It's oval though.
What's the name of the orange flower?
Gerbera daisy. It's always nice to put the kinsen in first because when you pour water it doesn't splash all over. Now I may have to move that because again, depending on the face of the stems, this is Italian ruscus. This also lasts forever.
Italian what?
Ruscus.
Ruscus.
R-U-S-K-U-S. There's a Israeli ruscus, which tends to be more upright. This more looks like bamboo. And I'm going to move it over because most of these branches I think are going to be better on this side.
Good Italian ruscus, is that a plant you could grow in your garden?
I don't think so because I know the florists, there's only one place they get it and it's from Italy. So I figured if it's very popular material because it lasts forever.
It's beautiful.
Right. So I figured if someone else could grow it, they would have by now.
Yeah, sure.
So again, we like to look at these materials. And what we look at is, again, I prep these because they can be very bushy. And I use what I've learned about bonsai techniques. A lot of times when on a branch coming off from the trunk, you don't like to have branches right at the crotch of that branch. So you can see, so the same thing here, they have a lot of leaves right at the crotch there. So you're moving, so again, this is for about the beauty of line. And I think just looking at that kind of relaxes you. Well, let's see. That's more of the face there, so. Same. So I'm going to do a little experiment here and see what you think.
Oh, I know.
So looking at this branch, do you think it looks better this way or that way? Other way. Right. So when you make an arrangement like this one, I'd want to have it maybe, with the viewer there. Now let's see, this way or that way? Oh my gosh, you're budding at Ikebana.
Oh, you're just saying.
Oh, let me see. I don't know if I did this one. I'll put them back on the table. So this way or that way? I think you did this way. This way or that way? You look like you.
I'm trying to see the difference. I realize there is.
Here would see
Oh,
more,
right.
more of the backside.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So if I make an arrangement, I want to show the beautiful side toward the viewer. This one? Or this? Yeah. And this way? Or that way? The other thing is that the tips sometimes, if they curve around that way, I mean, if this looks better in terms of the leaves, but if it curves you want it to curve toward it. So if it kind of turns away, you may not want that. You have to kind of engaging. But, oh my gosh, you should be up here.
No way.
Like this one, I think that looks better that one is kind of curving that way. So I'll put this on this side. And I think that, now this one kind of curves this way, but still I think that's a better size, so I'll put it on this side. Oops. That one I think is on that side. Okay, so this one's in our second book. You don't have as many rules to follow. It doesn't say specifically where to put things. You're beginning to train the eye and just get kind of used to it yourself. Some of the books they'll just say make an arrangement that has straight line and soft mass. So then you have to get materials where you combine soft mass, like let's say baby's breath, with straight line material, or curving line and straight line. So you might lose Solomon seal plus Liatris, or something strong. So then they get a little more complicated. They have to use 3 materials, and so they add the complexity to it. In our school, we'll do there's a framing material, like you might have a frame, like you'd have a picture. Or you might have a grid like what you might have in some of this wire shelving, and that kind of frames the arrangement where it's going to be. So you have to combine straight line, curving line, maybe in a frame that kind of sets the dimensions. So it gets a little bit more complicated. After a while, it gets to the point there where they say that more creativity. That's what scared me, because I'm a mathematics, science type of person. And that was the scary part, was they said, okay, now you have to make it straight line, soft mass arrangement. I don't know how to do that, So but eventually you learn with the help of a teacher. Okay. All right. So this one is the beauty of line. The nice thing about this too, you can increase the line, the curving. You just kind of bend it, and you kind of, I don't know, bonsai people probably know this too. You kind of stretch it until you think it's going to snap. And then if it snaps, you say, oops. Same sort of thing goes on with us. So I'm going to have to do it about here.
Actually, what you were just doing when you first positioned that, raise the question. Is it allowed to have the leaves that over far enough so that they're laying on?
Generally no. There are some arrangements. Again, that's one of the things I've noticed in my taking lessons on this, is there are a bunch of rules, but then you see examples where they're broken.
Right.
There's, in our school, our headmaster would have an arrangement. Like if you had, I don't know if you, there's a house plant called a Monstera philodendron. The leaves are huge. I have one growing in my home, and the leaves are about this big around. And what they will do, if you have a small container and you have this huge leaf, it doesn't make sense. They will bend it underneath the container as part of the arrangement. Not only is it touching, so not only is it sitting on the table, like something like this, which would not, I don't see that, but they bend it underneath as part of the arrangement, and they pull it off somehow. So they take this big leaf that you can't do. In fact, they might even wrap it around so it looks like it's part of the container. So you always find exceptions, but generally if you had this, you wouldn't want it like that. Now it may come awfully close to touching, but generally speaking, you would tend not to do that. Now this one can go a little bit beyond the container. Maybe just a little bit shorter. And it comes again, it's, I think bonsai technique, the trunk will lean toward, I think when I was taking bonsai, if I remember right, correct me, you bonsai artists, that the trunk and the branches will kind of go like this, again, like they're engaging. You wouldn't want them like that. Do you ever have it straight up?
So far, I'm upright, it's called, but you still want to form it so that you can see a part of the trunk, which would be not so much bending forward, but
the branches
reading.
do. You see, I think it's sort of like the, we have one arrangement called Heaven and Earth. It's a difficult arrangement to do. It's in a vase, and you have one branch coming up like this, one branch coming down like that. So it's again engaging, but it's almost like you're hugging somebody. So this one will be the one that usually is in the center. It's still maybe a little bit longer than what I want. Now in this arrangement, they don't tell you where to put it in the Kinsen so much. This one you typically put it in the center. Put it in there, kind of lean it. Down like that. And this one I think is going to get in the way. I might trim that one too. It looks like it might also. This one has to be trimmed. I'll use those later. This one again, it follows the same sort of pattern. You have the main upright branch, the first stem, main stem. This one goes over about 45 degrees. So, yeah, that's going to be about right.
They're each so eye-pleasing.
Well, thank you. That's the whole goal, you know.
Yeah, and you're following some principles. Somebody made up these principles, but somehow they're appealing.
Well, one time I remember taking a lesson from my teacher, and I came over in the evening, and she had made an arrangement with her teacher that day, and she had a dining room table with a light, and that was the only light on in the living room. I walked in and I was speechless. It's just one of those things. It was a relatively simple, didn't have a lot of elements, but I'm sure you see it with bonsai. You see this tree and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, when you see a good one, you know it. Just like these, I think.
well, thank you. I remember when I was taking bonsai, I think it was Nick Lenz. I was at a workshop, weekend workshop with Pauline Muth, and Nick Lenz was visiting, and he told me, he said, here, follow me to Pauline Muth's nursery. He said, buy that large. I thought it was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was scrawny and spindly, and I thought, this is a waste of time, but I'm not telling Nick Lenz I'm not buying it. So I bought it, and he said, wire it up, and I said, okay, I'm wiring up. This is such a waste of time. I don't know why I'm buying this tree. It's never going to, and I wired it up, and I said, okay, I wired it. And I'm surprised he didn't say something, because I'm sure it showed through. About how I just thought it was a waste of time. He sat down within 5 minutes. That was the most beautiful tree I'd ever seen.
You knew how to position
It was
everything.
literati. Yeah, and the way he bent it and brought the branches down, I was like, oh my God. So these are the first, second main stem. This goes again toward, maybe I can bring it a little bit more toward the viewer. And this one comes at sort of like a 45-degree angle. And this one is one thing you've learned is kind of inch your way up to the length. So you don't want to. I've done that with flowers. Oh, this would be a perfect length, and then I cut it. And it's like, oh my gosh. So I'm thinking that may be okay.
Will those cuttings root in that media, or it's just?
I've never had to do it before. And they last such a long time. I'm going to take a quick look here. I've never seen them root though.
Where did you say you bought this Italian ruscus?
There's only one wholesaler that I know of, and luckily he's down the street from where I live. Another advantage of moving to Buffalo. Seeks wholesale florists. It's like walking into a candy shop.
I bet, yeah.
Now, let's see. I want to get the right flowers for this. The thing about these Ikebana daisies, they again have faces on them, and they have curves. These may be a little bit small, so I may have to have assistant flowers. That's the thing. If you have a first main branch, it's kind of wispy. You can put one behind, give a little bit of depth and a little bit of weight, visual weight. This one goes between the first and second. Maybe a little bit too long.
And you always cut them in water, right?
Generally, what happens sometimes during the exhibitions that our headmaster will do is they don't come in water at all and put them on the stage and just put them in. But after they're done, they take pictures, it's done. You know. But if you want it to last.
I was always told to cut roses in water.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. If you don't, they wither limp real quick. Those take a special, this is a little too loose. The thing about these, when you do use these in exhibition, you always have some fear because they can turn bad right away. You can, if you had an exhibit next to a window, like tulips, they'll turn to the light. So what looked good when you made it, the next day you may not. Or they look wonderful, then the next day they're kind of.
Imagine doing all that. That's not the way I placed them.
Right, you come in the next day and you say, oh my gosh, you know. So you always cringe, but these had such a beautiful color. A little bit shorter. I'm just going to put, it's about 3/4, maybe just a little bit more. So the bee flower, the bud, they're about the same size, but this one leans most toward the viewer. And this one, I like the curves on some of these. You take advantage of those. I want to double check them before I, because to me they're looking a little wimpy compared to the Italian ruscus. Double check the lengths. Our school teaches to be able to make arrangements from behind, but it's always you wonder. Again, you have to get that kind of triangle thing. Down. The other thing, a little technique I've learned, if you want to make the flower bigger, you just put the similar one behind it. So the outline is kind of a little bit larger. It looks like a larger flower, but it isn't. Again, three main stems and three a little bit shorter. Sometimes you have to have little helpers because these are in such an angle. And the teeth are in between the put little supports in them.
Oh, you're mixing.
I'm not going to put the, I'm just using,
Oh.
you're learning all my secrets. I don't know if that's going to go in there. Almost. So this would be 1, 2, 3. This would be considered like a group. Let me just double check it one way. And one of the things you can also do, to me it looks like there's a little bit of, now this is, what I'm going to do now isn't typically a part of the arrangement, but sometimes
Is or isn't?
is not. These would be kind of, there's assistance that you can use to help with spaces that you think are a little too
Look, I was going to ask you if it's inappropriate to add something sort of around the base that adds a third color, but also is much shorter than the rest of the arrangement.
that's what I'm going to be doing. If you know, some of the material that you use can look full enough, but sometimes it doesn't, and then you can add what we call assistance. Like if you didn't have if it was more of a wispy main stem, you wanted a little depth to it, you had another one behind it, that would be called an assisted stem. A lot of times if it looks too bare at the base, you can add the assistant stems, which I'm going to try and do here. So it gives it some more visual weight. And I'm using these chrysanthemum stems as little booties because that's, you can see that's pretty thin, and it's not going to hold within our.
How'd you get the hole in it?
It comes naturally that way.
Oh.
It has a soft pith to it, so even if it doesn't, you can easily stick it through. Now, one of the things about our school is that some of the schools will not show the kinsen at all. You're always supposed to cover it up.
Wait, not supposed to show what?
The pin holder called a
pin.
kinsen. Some schools will make a big deal about covering it up.
With what?
Materials, put down low, maybe smaller stems to kind of hide it.
But not necessarily like stone?
Sometimes you can do that, but it depends on the arrangement. Oh, here it is.
And the two that you already have on the table over there, are there pen holders in those?
Yes.
So they come in different shapes, like
Yeah, some of them are square, some of them are round. Our school uses pretty much those, but in other schools you can find them in a fan or triangular shape. Put this around here. So now that adds a little bit more visual depth there. About these Gerbera daisies, they can get a little mushy, just like calla lilies, mushy at the base. A little bit shorter, and I think that'll be it. So these are like this, and then that one's sort of like that.
Is the point of the stem towards you or away from you? You cut it on that angle.
On the stems, the open side is away from the viewer for the branches. For the flowers, we don't do that
Well, the flowers you aren't doing it. Oh.
as much. Those are pretty much straight across. So usually we don't have flowers grouped together tight, but I think this needed a little bit more weight than the dish because these are small. Ideally, I think the flowers would be a little bit larger. The yellow or orange Gerberas are too big, and I thought with this light material, you'd want a light flower.
That looks absolutely gorgeous.
This,
Just beautiful.
so, with your expertise in judging the front side of flowers,
We have no expertise here.
I don't know. You picked out the branches the way they should have been.
Just the front ones. And these are just stunning.
Can I see a pin cushion? the pen and paper?
Sure, let's see.